What would you do if you saw a person caged like an animal, mocked and forgotten by the world? Would you turn your head away? Or would you stop and listen to the voice inside your heart? Let me tell you the story of Clara Bell, a woman the world called a beast, and the man who saw something different. This is a story that will break your heart, and then piece it back together again. The town of Willow Creek was small and sunburned, where the air was always dry and the dust never settled. People gathered in the town square, not for music, not for festivals, not for joy, but for cruelty. At the center of it all stood a cage. A tall, rusted cage with bars thick enough to hold a wild animal. And inside it sat Clara Bell. She had once been just another woman of Willow Creek. A wife, a neighbor, a human being. But after her husband's death, the whispers began. She killed 3 men, they said. She can lift a horse clear off the ground. She isn't even human anymore. And the sheriff, greedy for power and gold, saw profit in her pain. He locked her away like a sideshow and nailed a sign above her cage. $1 to look. $10 to touch the beast. Travelers came from miles away to gawk at her. They laughed, pointed, and tossed coins into the sheriff's pocket. Some threw rocks. Some spat at her feet. Others dared each other to reach through the bars and brush her hand, as if touching her gave them proof she was more creature than woman. Clara never spoke. Her eyes, cold, hollow, and distant, were like a winter sky after all the warmth had gone. She didn't fight back. She didn't cry. It was as if her soul had left her body long ago. 2 long years passed this way. 2 years of silence. 2 years of being called the widow beast. 2 years of cruel laughter echoing through the town square. Until one hot afternoon when a stranger rode into Willow Creek. His name was Samuel Hayes. A cowboy with broad shoulders and weary eyes. To the townsfolk, he looked like any other drifter. Dusty boots, sun-worn hat, a saddlebag carrying what little he owned. But Samuel was not just any man. He carried sorrow heavier than any load a horse could bear. Years earlier, fever had taken his wife, Lila, and the unborn child she carried. He had buried them both on a hill, and ever since, he had been wandering. He drifted from town to town, never staying long, never letting himself care. When Samuel reached Willow Creek, he heard laughter first. Harsh, ugly laughter rolling through the air like thunder. Curious, he pushed through the crowd, thinking it might be a game or a show. But what he saw froze him in place. There behind the bars sat Clara Bell. The crowd called her a monster. Beast. But Samuel didn't see a monster. He saw her eyes. Empty, yes, but beneath that emptiness, a flicker of something he recognized. Loneliness. The same loneliness that had hollowed out his own heart when he laid flowers on Lila's grave. A rock struck Clara's shoulder. She didn't flinch. She just sat there, still as stone, as the crowd laughed louder. Samuel's jaw tightened. He knew what it was like to want to disappear, to feel as if the world had buried you while you were still alive. And he couldn't watch it anymore. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. How much to set her free? The words hit the square like a crack of thunder. The laughter stopped. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The sheriff squinted, his lips curling into a greedy grin. Set her free. You serious, stranger? Samuel didn't blink. Dead serious. The sheriff chuckled. $500. Enough to buy you a good ranch. That's the price of a beast. The crowd murmured, expecting the stranger to scoff and turn away. But Samuel reached into his saddlebag. He pulled out a leather pouch heavy with coins, gold he had saved through years of drifting, years of sorrow, years of holding on to something he didn't even know he was waiting for. Without hesitation, he dropped the pouch into the sheriff's hand. The sheriff's eyes widened. The crowd gasped. The sheriff laughed and tossed him the keys. She's yours then. God help you. The cage door creaked open. Rust groaned as if even the metal had forgotten freedom. Clara slowly lifted her head. For the first time in years she looked at someone, not with anger, not with defiance, but with confusion. Samuel stepped closer. He knelt down so that his eyes were level with hers. His voice was steady, gentle, almost like a prayer. "My name is Samuel Hayes. And I've got one question for you." The crowd leaned in, hungry for more spectacle. "Clara Bell," he said softly, "will you marry me?" The words dropped into the silence like stones into a still pond. The crowd erupted. Some laughed so hard they doubled over. Others cursed, shouting that he was a fool, that he was throwing his life away. But Samuel's eyes never left hers. Clara's lips trembled. Her voice, unused for so long, came out soft and broken. "Why?" Samuel's answer was simple. "Because no one deserves to live in a cage. Because I see your pain. And I see my own in it. And because maybe we can heal together." For the first time in years, Clara's eyes filled with tears. Slowly, with trembling hands, she stepped out of the cage. And in that moment, the story of the widow beast began to change. When Samuel Hayes dropped those words, "Clara Bell, will you marry me?" the whole town of Willow Creek lost its breath. For a moment, there was silence so sharp you could hear the flies buzzing in the heat. And then, all at once, the laughter, the shouting, the anger exploded like fire in the square. "Marry the beast," someone cackled. "He's lost his mind," another spat. "She killed men. She'll kill him too," shouted the blacksmith, his face red with rage. But Samuel stood calm, steady as an oak tree in the middle of a storm. He didn't look at them. He didn't flinch at their curses. His eyes never left Clara's. Clara's lips quivered as she whispered the word, "Why?" And Samuel answered with a voice so steady it quieted even the cruelest laugh. "Because no one deserves to live in a cage. Because I see your pain. And I see my own in it. And because maybe, just maybe, we can heal together." For 2 years, Clara hadn't shed a tear. But in that moment, the ice around her heart began to crack. Her eyes shimmered and slowly, hesitantly, she stepped out of the cage. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't new. It was his grandmother's wedding band. Dented, old, but filled with meaning. He slid it onto Clara's finger as the crowd roared with outrage. "She's mine now," Samuel said firmly. "And no man, no lie, no chain will hold her again." The sheriff laughed bitterly, but his voice was tight with greed. "You paid your gold, cowboy. She's yours to deal with now. Don't come crying when she tears your world apart." The blacksmith stepped forward, pointing a finger. "She killed my brother. Do you think we'll just let her walk free?" For the first time in years, Clara raised her voice. It cracked at first, rough from silence, but then it grew steady, powerful. "Your brother and his friends cornered me after my husband died," she said, her voice ringing through the square. "They tried to take what wasn't theirs. They thought because I was grieving I was weak. But I fought back. My strength saved me. And for that you called me a beast." The crowd jeered, some with disbelief, others with anger. But Samuel stood tall at her side. He took her hand and lifted it high. "She is no beast," he declared. "She is my wife-to-be. And if any of you wish to harm her, you'll have to go through me first." The crowd bristled. Some spat at the ground, others cursed his name. But no one dared to step closer. Not with Samuel's hand resting calmly on the handle of his revolver. That night, Samuel lifted Clara onto his horse, and together they rode out of Willow Creek. The dust rose behind them, carrying with it the jeers and threats of the town that had caged her. But they didn't look back. Hours later, they reached Pine Ridge, a small town nestled in the hills. There, in a quiet church lit only by candlelight, a kind old preacher married them. The preacher's wife stood as their witness. Clara wore her torn dress with Samuel's coat draped over her shoulders. Samuel was dusty from the road. But their vows weren't about beauty, or wealth, or perfection. They were about survival. About choosing each other when the whole world wanted them broken. When Samuel kissed Clara, it wasn't the kiss of a man saving a woman, nor of a woman saving a man. It was the kiss of two broken souls finding one another in the ashes of pain. But their new beginning did not come without shadows. Word of what happened in Willow Creek spread quickly. Men spat curses when Samuel passed by. Neighbors whispered about Clara, calling her dangerous, saying Samuel was a fool. Some even came to his land in Colorado, threatening him, mocking him, vowing that Clara's past would catch up to her. But Samuel never wavered. He stood beside Clara with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose, and everything left to protect. At night, when the world was quiet and the fire crackled low, Samuel shared his own story. He told Clara about Lila, his late wife, about the child he lost to fever. His voice cracked as he spoke, but Clara listened. She held his silence as if it were her own. And when it was her turn, she told him about Robert, her husband, and about the men who had cornered her, and how her strength had cursed her life. Samuel reached across the flames and took her hand. Your strength didn't curse you, saved you. And now, it will keep us both alive. And slowly, the walls around Clara's heart began to fall. The ranch became their home. They mended fences together, cooked meals together, shared laughter that started soft and uncertain, but grew stronger each day. Samuel, who hadn't smiled in years, began to smile again. Clara, who hadn't laughed in years, began to laugh again. One evening, Samuel looked across the fire and said, "You don't look like the woman I saw in that cage." Clara lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "That's because, for the first time in years, I am free." The night air wrapped around them like a blessing, and for a moment, even the ghosts of the past seemed to rest. Life on the ranch gave Samuel and Clara something neither of them thought they'd find again: peace. For the first time in years, Clara woke up without the clank of chains. She woke to the sound of birdsong, the smell of coffee, and the warmth of Samuel's hand brushing against hers. She worked the land, carried buckets of water, stacked hay, and mended fences. Her strength, once mocked as monstrous, now kept their small world alive. And Samuel, he found healing in her laughter. It wasn't loud, it wasn't constant, but it was real. And each time he heard it, something inside him softened. The grief of losing Lila still lived in him, but Clara's presence turned it from a crushing weight into something he could finally carry. But peace never stays long when the world refuses to forget. One morning, Samuel returned from town with his jaw tight and his eyes stormy. Clara, pulling laundry from the line, saw it instantly. "What happened?" she asked softly. "They know," he muttered. "The whole town knows who you are. They're saying I'm a fool, that you'll bring ruin. Some want you locked up again. Some want worse." Clara froze. The old fear clawed at her chest, the fear of being caged, of being spat on, of being called a beast. She clenched the sheet in her hands until her knuckles turned white. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. "Maybe I should go. If I leave, you'll be safe." Samuel dropped the sack of grain he carried and gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. His eyes blazed with fire. "No, don't you dare say that. I didn't free you just to let the world take you again. You're my wife. And I will stand by you no matter what." Her eyes filled with tears. She had never been claimed with such love before. That night, the shadows of her past came knocking. A group of men rode up to the ranch, faces she recognized from Willow Creek. The blacksmith was among them, his eyes burning with hate. "Samuel Hayes," he shouted. "Come out here. You think you can take what doesn't belong to you? You think you can shelter a beast and get away with it?" Samuel stepped outside, his revolver resting calmly in his hand, though he did not raise it. Clara followed him, her head held high, though her heart pounded like a war drum. "She's not a beast," Samuel said firmly. "She's my wife. And she belongs to no man but herself." The blacksmith spat on the ground. "She murdered my brother. You think we'll forget that?" Clara's voice rang out clear, cutting through the night air. "Your brother tried to take what was not his. He thought my grief made me weak. But I fought back. I will not apologize for surviving. The men muttered, anger rippling through them. One stepped forward, hand on his gun. The blacksmith sneered. Then maybe survival ends tonight. Samuel's voice turned to steel. If any of you move against her, you'll have to face me first. And I promise you, I will not miss. For a long, tense moment, the night stood still. The men looked at Samuel's steady hand, at Clara's unflinching gaze. Slowly, one by one, they backed down. The blacksmith cursed under his breath, mounted his horse, and spat one last word into the dirt. This ain't over. But as their hooves thundered away into the dark, Samuel wrapped his arm around Clara, pulling her close. Yes, it is, he whispered. Because they'll never break us. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Slowly the whispers faded. The hatred dulled. And though some still looked at Clara with suspicion, others began to see what Samuel had seen from the beginning. Not a beast, but a woman with a strength forged in fire. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Samuel looked across the flames and smiled softly. You don't look like the woman I freed from that cage anymore. Clara tilted her head, her voice trembling but sure. That's because I'm not. I'm free. I'm loved. I'm home. Samuel reached across the flames, took her hand and kissed it. For the first time in years, the weight of sorrow lifted fully from his chest. And for Clara, the chains of her past finally broke. Together beneath the wide Colorado sky, they found what the world said they didn't deserve. Love, freedom, and a home built not on perfection, but on survival, and on choosing each other day after day. So, my friend, let me ask you, what would you do if you saw someone the world had caged and forgotten? Would you walk past, or would you stop like Samuel did? If this story touched your heart, don't just leave quietly. Share your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories like this one. Because sometimes the ones the world calls beasts are the ones who carry the most human hearts of all.